Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday poetry stream. I'm here by myself at the moment, which is like the most uncomfortable position I could ever be in. Hopefully, Nate is able to join. He's got some things going on today, so he said he might pop in. I'm crossing my fingers. I'm going to throw an invite into the chat. And I would love it if people would just jump in. We can talk about anything. We can talk about poetry. We can talk about the weather. We can talk about farming. Chickens. Talk about all kinds of stuff. I picked out a few things to read just to buy myself some time here because I just don't know what else to talk about. And I think I'm going to read a portion. I've been wanting to read this whole essay. I'm not going to read the whole thing right now, but I am going to read a portion of MacDonald's essay on Shelley because he was a poet. And it's mostly little tidbits about his personal life and things. Just want to see here quickly if he... So in the very beginning of the essay, he says, whatever opinion may be held with regard to the relative position occupied by Shelley as a poet, it will be granted by most of those who have studied his writings that they are of such an individual and original kind that he can neither be hidden in the shade nor lost in the brightness of any other poet. No idea of his works could be conveyed by instituting a comparison, for he does not sufficiently resemble any other among English writers to make such a comparison possible. He was born at Field Place near Horsham in the county of Sussex on the 4th of August, 1792. He was the son of Timothy Shelley, Esquire, and grandson of Sir Bysshe Shelley, the first baronet. His ancestors had long been large landed proprietors in Sussex. As a child, his habits were noticeable. He was especially fond of rambling by moonlight, of inventing wonderful tales, of occupying himself with strange and sometimes dangerous amusements. At the age of 13, he went to Eton. In this little world, I believe C.S. Lewis went to Eton, and a number of well-known people, actually. In this little world that determined opposition to whatever appeared to him an invasion of human rights and liberty, which was afterwards the animating principle of most of his writings, was first roused in the mind of Shelley. So he was a little social justice warrior of sorts, which I can totally relate to, actually. Okay, so that's just the beginning of the essay. And I'm going to read here. So he wrote a poem called Adonis. And George, in this part of the essay, he's talking about some of his poetry. The last verse of the Adonis seems almost prophetic of his own end. Passionately fond of boating, he and a friend of his, Mr. Williams, united in constructing a boat of a peculiar build, a very fast sailor, but difficult to manage. On the 8th of July, 1822, Shelley and his friend Williams sailed from Leghorn for Lerici on the Bay of Spezia, near which lay his home for the time. A sudden squall came on and their boat disappeared. The bodies of the two friends were cast on shore, and according to quarantine regulations, were burned to ashes. Lord Byron, Leigh Hunt, and Mr. Trelawney were present when the body of Shelley was burned. so that his ashes were saved and buried in the Protestant burial ground at Rome, near the grave of Keats, whose body had been laid there in the spring of the preceding year. Cor Cordium were the words inscribed by his widow on the tomb of the poet. And Cor Cordium, heart of hearts, is what that means. The character of Shelley has been sadly maligned. Whatever faults he may have committed against society, they were not the result of sensuality. Oh, hey, everybody. Rambling by moonlight was a thing for you too, Anselman? I can imagine. Hi, Tunji. I know that Anselman will not join me, but I wish he would. One of his biographers, who was his companion at Oxford, and who does not seem inclined to do him more than justice, asserts that while there his conduct was immaculate. The whole picture he gives of the youth makes it easy to believe this. To discuss the moral question involved in one part of his history would be out of place here, but even on the supposition that a man's conduct is altogether inexcusable in individual instances, there is the more need that nothing but the truth should be said concerning that and other portions thereof. And whatever society, oh, you know what? I don't have my microphone here. Let's, hang on. Sorry, guys. I was worried about being late. Forgot about my microphone. Okay, it's probably going to sound better now. Good morning, Slack. All right, where was I? And whatever society may have thought itself justified in making subject of reprobation, it must be remembered that Shelley was under less obligation to society than most men. Yet his heart seemed full of love to his kind, and the distress which the oppression of others caused him was the source of much of that wild denunciation which exposed him to the contempt and hatred of those who were rendered uncomfortable by his unsparing and indiscriminate anathemas. In private, he was beloved by all who knew him, a steady, generous, self-denying friend, not only to those who moved in his own circle, but to all who were brought within the reach of any aid he could bestow. To the poor, he was a true and laborious benefactor. That man must have been good to whom the heart of his widow returns with such earnest devotion and thankfulness in the recollection of the past, and such fond hope for the future as are manifested by Mrs. Shelley in those extracts from her private journal given us by Lady Shelley. As regards his religious opinions, one of the thoughts which most strongly suggests themselves is how ill he must have been instructed in the principles of Christianity! ! He says himself in a letter to Godwin, "I have known no tutor or adviser, not excepting my father, from whose lessons and suggestions I have not recoiled with disgust." So far is he from being an opponent of Christianity properly so called, that one can hardly help feeling what a Christian he would have been, could he have but seen Christianity in any other way than through the traditional and practical misrepresentations of it which surrounded him. All his attacks on Christianity are, in reality, directed against evils to which the true doctrines of Christianity are more opposed than those of Shelley could possibly be. How far he was excusable in giving the name of Christianity to what he might have seen to be only a miserable perversion of it is another question, and one which hardly admits of discussion here. It was in the name of Christianity, however, that the worst injuries of which he had to complain were inflicted upon him. Coming out of the cathedral at Pisa one day, and this is a footnote from Shelley Memorials edited by Lady Shelley, Shelley warmly assented to a remark of Leigh Hunt, quote, that a divine religion might be found out if charity were really made the principle of it instead of faith, unquote. Surely the founders of Christianity, even when they magnified faith, intended thereby a spiritual condition of which the central principle is coincident with charity. Shelley's own feelings towards others, as judged from his poetry, seem to be tinctured with the very essence of Christianity. Footnote, his essay on Christianity is full of noble views, some of which are held at the present day by some of the most earnest believers. At what time of his life it was written, we are not informed, but it seems such as would ensure his acceptance with any company of intelligent and devout Unitarians. That's the end of the footnote. He did not, at one time at least, believe that we could know the source of our being, and seemed to take it as a self-evident truth that the Creator could not be like the creature. But it is unjust to fix upon any utterance of opinion and regard it as the religion of a man who died in his 30th year, and whose habits of thinking were such that his opinions must have been in a state of constant change. This is something that I would love to talk about if somebody would jump in here with me. You know, the idea that someone is perceived as being a quote that they may have, something that they may have said years prior, and as if they could not change their minds. I mean, isn't that what metanoia is, right? Changing our minds for the better. Coleridge says in a letter, Shelley's discussions tending towards atheism of a certain sort would not have scared me. For me, it would have been a semi-transparent larva, soon to be sloughed, and through which I should have seen the final metamorphosis. Besides, I have ever thought that sort of atheism the next best religion to Christianity. Nor does the better faith I have learned from Paul and John interfere with the cordial reverence I feel for Benedict Spinoza. That's a quote from Coleridge. Shelley's favorite study was metaphysics. The more impulse there is in any direction, the more education and experience are necessary to balance that impulse. One cannot help thinking that Shelley's taste for exercises of this kind was developed more rapidly than the corresponding power. His favorite physical studies were chemistry and electricity. With these he occupied himself from his childhood, apparently, however, with more delight in the experiments themselves than interest in the general conclusions to be arrived at by means of them. In the embodiment of his metaphysical ideas in poetry, the influence of these studies seems to show itself, for he uses forms which appeal more to the outer senses than to the inward eye, and his similes belong to the realm of the fancy rather than the imagination. They lack vital resemblance. Oh, really? I just have to point this out here. I didn't know Coleridge was Unitarian. I'm sure there were a lot of Unitarians back in the day. I think both he and Byron were rather reckless characters. Yeah. I think they were perceived as reckless. But I think the point that you'll notice George making is, people who criticized him from the outside would have called him reckless. People on the inside said that he was steady and kind and generous. So, yeah. Guess we have to make our own decisions about those things. So the last sentence I read was, his similes belong to the realm of the fancy rather than the imagination. They lack vital resemblance. Logic had considerable attractions for him. To geometry and mathematics, he was quite indifferent. One of his biographers states that, quote, he was neglectful of flowers, unquote, because he had no interest in botany. The one who derived such full delight from the contemplation of their external forms could hardly be expected to feel very strongly the impulse to dissect them. Oh, there's a little dig. He derived exceeding pleasure from Greek literature, especially from the works of Plato. Several little peculiarities in Shelley's tastes are worth mentioning, because although in themselves insignificant, they seem to correspond with the nature of his poetry. Perhaps the most prominent of these was his passion for boat sailing. He could not pass any piece of water without launching upon it a number of boats constructed from what paper he could find in his pockets. The fly leaves of the books he was in the way of carrying with him, for he was constantly reading, often went to this end. He would watch the fate of these little boats with the utmost interest till they sank or reached the opposite side. That's really interesting because in the beginning of the essay, he talks about how Shelley was always moving. He never stayed in one place very long. And when I read that, I just think he was kind of like that little boat. Always moving. He was just as fond of real boating, and that frequently of a dangerous kind. But it is characteristic of him that all the boats he describes in his poems are of a fairy, fantastic sort, barely related to the boats which battle with earthly winds and waves. So that might have lent to his reckless reputation, Anselman. Pistol shooting was also a favorite amusement. Fireworks, too, gave him great delight. Some of his habits were likewise peculiar. He was remarkably abstemious. Okay, I'm looking that one up. Indulging only very moderately in something, especially food and drink. Okay, so he was a moderate drinker and a moderate eater, preferring bread and raisins to anything else in the way of eating, and very seldom drinking anything stronger than water. Honey was a favorite luxury with him. While at college, his biographer Hogg says he was in the habit during the evening of going to sleep on the rug, close to a blazing fire, heat seeming never to have other than a beneficial effect upon him. After sleeping some hours, he would awake perfectly restored and continue actively occupied till far into the morning. His whole movements are represented as rapid, hurried, and uncertain. He would appear and disappear suddenly and unexpectedly, forget appointments, burst into wild laughter, heedless of his situation whenever anything struck him as peculiarly ludicrous. His changes of residence were most numerous, and frequently made with so much haste that whole little libraries were left behind and often lost. He was very fond of children and used to make humorous efforts to induce them to disclose to him the still remembered secrets of their pre-existence. He seemed to have a peculiar attraction towards mystery and was ready to believe in a hidden secret where no one else would have thought of one. His room, while he was at college, was in a state of indescribable confusion. I guess he wouldn't have really worked out well for the Peterson movement. Not only were all sorts of personal necessaries mingled with books and philosophical instruments, but things belonging to one department of service were not unfrequently pressed into the slavery of another. I'm going to read that again. Things belonging to one department of service were not unfrequently pressed into the slavery of another. So he was, what do they call that? Anselman. I've heard it said that, we live in such a specialized culture now that these disciplines don't cross-pollinate each other. And so you get less of a holistic point of view about anything, whether it be health or farming or whatever. Everybody has their little specialty, and they don't talk to each other. So obviously Shelley was very good at bringing things together, integrating things, which is great, I think. He dressed well but carelessly. In person, he was tall, slender, and stooping, awkward in gait, but in manners a thorough gentleman. His complexion was delicate, his head, face, and features remarkably small, the last not very regular, but in expression both intellectual and moral, wonderfully beautiful. His eyes were deep blue, quote, of a wild, strange beauty, unquote. His forehead high and white, his hair dark brown, curling, long, and bushy. His appearance in later life is described as singularly combining the appearances of premature age and prolonged youth. The only art in which his taste appears to have been developed was poetry. Even in his poetry, taken as a whole, the artistic element is not generally very manifest. His earliest verses, none of which are included in his collected works, can hardly be said to be good in any sense. He seems in these to have chosen poetry as a fitting material for the embodiment of his ardent, hopeful, indignant thoughts and feelings. But, provided he can say what he wants to say, does not seem to care much about how he says it. Indeed, there is too much of this throughout his works. For if the utterance, instead of the conveyance of thought, were the object pursued in art, of course, not merely imperfection of language, but absolute external unintelligibility would be admissible. But his art constantly increases with his sense of its necessity, so that here's an Italian word that I'm going to try to say. I don't know if Tunji's still watching, but cenci, CENCI. I want to say senci, but it's probably cenci. I'm not sure. Which is the last work of any pretension that he wrote, is decidedly the most artistic of all. There are beautiful passages in Queen Mab, but it is the work of a boy poet, and as it was all but repudiated by himself, it is not necessary to remark further upon it. The Revolt of Islam is a poem of 12 cantos in the Spenserian stanza, but in all respects except the arrangement of lines and rhymes, his stanza, in common with all other imitations of the Spenserian, has little or nothing of the spirit or individuality of the original. The poem is dedicated to the cause of freedom and records the efforts, successes, defeats, and final triumphant death of two inspired champions of liberty, a youth and a maiden. The adventures are marvelous, not intended to be within the bounds of probability, scarcely of possibility. There are very noble sentiments and fine passages throughout the poem. Now and then there is grandeur. But the absence of art is too evident in the fact that the meaning is often obscure, an obscurity not unfrequently occasioned by the difficulty of the stanza, which is the most difficult mode of composition in English, except the rigid sonnet. The words and forms he employs to express thought seem sometimes mechanical devices for that purpose, rather than an utterance which suggested itself naturally to a mind where the thought was vitally present. The words are more a clothing for the thought than an embodiment of it. They do not lie near enough to the thing which is intended to be represented by them. So I think this is actually for a poetry live stream. This is kind of interesting instruction. So let's read that again. The words and forms he employs to express thought seem sometimes mechanical devices for that purpose, rather than an utterance which suggested itself naturally to a mind where the thought was vitally present. Oh, thank goodness. Thank
Hey. I couldn't stay away altogether. I'm gonna have to leave as soon as my wife gets back here with my mom. So we're gonna be hanging out with mom, but
yeah, no worries.
Here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
No one got in to join you.
Well, I haven't been here that long. Oh. I'm reading part of an essay by MacDonald on Shelley.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like almost finished here. So let me just finish.
Yeah, really I'll quick. Just listen.
So I was reading over for the second time a little critique that MacDonald gives of Shelley's early poetry. He says, the words and forms he employs to express thought seem sometimes mechanical devices for that purpose, rather than an utterance which suggested itself naturally to a mind where the thought was vitally present. The words are more a clothing for the thought than an embodiment of it. They do not lie near enough to the thing which is intended to be represented by them. And when I read that little criticism, I think of in Lilith how words are live things, he calls them live things. And he does this illustration of prayer, for example, as actual pigeons. The pigeons are prayers, and prayers are pigeons. So I think that's what he's getting at.
Well, that's really deep and insightful, because that right there, what MacDonald's talking about there, that's when I talk about this idea of the poetic vocation being related to witness.
Right.
That's what MacDonald is pointing at, because it's like what he's critiquing Shelley for is that Shelley the poet, not having gotten out of the way of his vocation to be a witness, like it's like he's exercising the poet's art too much, essentially, is what MacDonald is saying there.
Right.
And
he is
not,
yeah,
which actually interferes with the truth of the poem being allowed to come forth.
He calls it the vitality, which is the life of it.
Life, truth, love. They're the same. They all mean the same thing. And in fact, when we divorce them from one another, is when we get a problem.
Yeah. Well,
especially the truth one. Because when we divorce truth from love and life, it gets, that's how we incarnate evil.
Well, this is a criticism of his early poetry. Let me just, reiterate that. So I'm just going to end here. They do not lie near enough to the thing which is intended to be represented by them. It is, however, but just to remark that some of the obscurity is owing to the fact that even with Mrs. Shelley's superintendence, the works have not yet been satisfactorily edited, or at least not conducted through the press with sufficient care. So I'll just leave it at that, since you're here, and I will read that at some point in its entirety because I love it. But just to kind of, on the tail end of that, I want to read.
I really need to figure out a time when we can do some MacDonald stuff together, because I always miss out on your MacDonald stuff.
Oh, I'd love that, Nate. Like,
I have such. Yeah, there's nothing.
I'm starved for a conversation partner at the moment because Luke Johnson is he's just like up to his eyeballs and stuff to do. So
yeah, weren't you gonna, like, in May sometime? Are you having a conversation with Jordan?
Well, yeah, we don't have a date, but sometime in May.
Jordan Daniel Wood, not Peterson. Just FYI.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what I would talk to Peterson about.
Yeah, I know what I'd talk to him about. I don't know how it would go, but I do know what I would talk about. I'll leave it at that. So I got a couple of poems that I.
Well, let me just read this. Let me just read this poem from Shelley. It's not an entire poem because it's quite the epic poem here. But I'm just going to read the first two, or maybe it's three stanzas. It's called Alastor, or Spirit of Solitude. And he prefaces it with two quotes. One from Wordsworth: "The good die first, and those whose hearts are dry as summer dust burn to the socket." And then the other quote is from the Confessions of St. Augustine. And Nate, you can be my translator because it's in Latin. And I did write it down somewhere else, but I don't know where it is at the moment. Nondum amabum et amare amabum, queribum quid amarum, amans amare.
Well, those are all like conjugations of the verb to love, but I haven't. My Latin is like 30 years old, so don't expect me to.
Let me see here. I'm just going to write amabum. Oops. Where did I put that? Oh, actually, I think I stuck it in the Discord, so I won't be able to find it. Yeah, it is. It's about love. I looked it up. Okay, now I'm going to read. Earth, ocean, air, beloved brotherhood, if our great mother has imbued my soul with aught of natural piety to feel your love and recompense the boon with mine, if dewy morn and odorous noon, and even with sunset and its gorgeous ministers, and solemn midnight's tingling silentness, if autumn's hollow sighs in the sere wood, and winter robing with pure snow and crowns of starry ice the gray grass and bare boughs, if spring's voluptuous pantings, when she breathes her first sweet kisses, have been dear to me, if no bright bird, insect, or gentle beast I consciously have injured but still loved and cherished these my kindred, then forgive this boast, beloved brethren, and withdraw no portion of your wonted favor now. Mother of this unfathomable world, favor my solemn song, for I have loved thee ever and thee only. I have watched thy shadow and the darkness of thy steps, and my heart ever gazes on the depth of thy deep mysteries. I have made my bed in charnels and on coffins where black death keeps record of the trophies won from thee, hoping to still these obstinate questionings of thee and thine by forcing some lone ghost, thy messenger, to render up the tale of what we are. In lone and silent hours, when night makes a weird sound of its own stillness, like an inspired and desperate alchemist staking his very life on some dark hope, have I mixed awful talk and asking looks with my most innocent love, until strange tears, uniting with those breathless kisses, made such magic as compels the charmed night to render up thy charge. And though ne'er yet thou hast unveiled thy inmost sanctuary, enough from incommunicable dream and twilight phantasms and deep noonday thought has shone within me, that serenely now and moveless, as a long forgotten lyre suspended in the solitary dome of some mysterious and deserted fane, I wait thy breath, great parent, that my strain may modulate with murmurs of the air and motions of the forests and the sea, and voice of living beings and woven hymns of night and day and the deep heart of man.
So you know what my first impression is?
What's that?
How much did you see Jess's most recent video on the Book of Job, where he's responding to Jordan Peterson's conversation with Bishop Barron on Job?
How recent is it?
Like fairly recent,
Oh, okay. I don't think I've seen it.
Last few days. Okay. Well, there's a let me see if I can find the actually let me see if I can pull it up and share the portion that I'm talking about.
Cool.
Here we go. Yeah, 2 days ago, Sherry.
Okay, I'll have to watch it.
I'll have to get to the. I have. Let me just fast forward to the. There we go. Here we go. All right. So let me go back to StreamYard here, and then share screen, and then this one here.
Yay! There it is.
So this is. I actually just need the screenshot. This is the section. This is the section from Job that he shared in this video. So I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust. My face is red with weeping, and on my eyelids is deep darkness. And though there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry find no resting place. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. So the comment that I made on this video of Jess's, actually I could probably find my comment right here. Oh, he replied. I haven't seen his reply yet. I said the portion you had on screen, and then it's Job 16 verses 15 through 19. Job seems to be dealing with the transcendence of God, which is ultimately impersonal, and contrasts it with the personal God, who is the one he hopes to meet face to face, witness and advocate. And then I also commented that he makes my that was actually Luke. I did not get a reply from Jess, so I don't know what Jess thought of that observation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's also what's going on in Shelley's poem. It's like he is wrestling with like the kind of like impersonal, abstract notion of deity, which is kind of like the abstract cause of the world kind of thing that doesn't seem to have any relation to us, and we're just thrown into this and it doesn't have any meaning, versus the dawning realization of the personal element of God, which is what comes crashing through. And I think that's why Job is protesting to that kind of like rigid, kind of karmic kind of view of reality, because that is very much like rooted in that kind of like abstract, mechanical, impersonal kind of view of deity, where it's just like there's just like this universal balance that has to be served, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not how but persons don't relate to each other in that way.
Well, if you get a chance to go back and listen to the first part of the essay that I read, that's the point that George MacDonald makes. Like Shelley is basically protesting against the God that George MacDonald doesn't believe in.
I don't believe in it either.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And he points out that he was not treated very well by people within the church because of his atheism, right? But his atheism was an atheism directed towards a God that doesn't exist.
Right.
Right. So.
Okay, so this is the perfect transition to one of the poems that I wanted to share today. Is actually Walt Whitman's Song of the Universal. Do you know it?
Song of Myself?
No, Song of the Universal.
Okay. I don't know it.
Okay. All right. I think that let's see what you think of this one.
Yeah.
Let's see. Actually, I actually probably could share it on screen to make it easier for people to follow. I don't know why I haven't thought about doing this before now, but here we go. All right, now everybody should be able to see the text.
Can you make it a bit bigger?
Let me go into StreamYard and see.
Or just on the webpage, or just on your browser.
You know what? I can probably change it so that oh no, that doesn't do it at all. That just that makes it smaller.
Don't make me big.
That doesn't.
That's not.
There we go. That makes kind of, but then it makes it hard to see. Oh, there we go. It's just the text now, and not even us.
Okay. Which is boring.
Yeah, that is boring. Okay, so let's do. Oh, that just shows you.
I know.
How do I get back to the How do I get back to the default view?
There we go. No.
Right, but it's not showing the.
Yeah, but then you just have to. Put that guy back. Put him in. Put that window in.
Oh, gotcha.
I think.
No.
Right. What happened to
Add
it?
to stage. There we go. Okay.
There we go.
All right. Okay. All right. So, yeah, my StreamYard foo is not enough. I'm sure Grimp can tell me how to do it, but okay, wrong poem. All right, here we go. All right. So, Song of the Universal. Come, said the muse. Sing me a song no poet has yet chanted. Sing me the universal. In this broad earth of ours, amid the measureless grossness and the slag, enclosed and safe within its central heart, nestles the seed perfection. By every life a share, or more or less, none born, but it is born, concealed or unconcealed, the seed is waiting. Lo, keen-eyed, towering science, as far as from tall peaks, the modern overlooking successive absolute flats issuing. Yet again, lo the soul above all science, for it has history gathered like a husk around the globe. For it, the entire star myriads roll through the sky in spiral roads by long detours, as a much tacking ship upon the sea. For it, the partial to the permanent flowering. For it, the real to the ideal tends. For it, the mystic evolution. Not the right only justified, but we call evil also justified. Forth from their mass, no matter what, from the huge festering trunk, from craft and guile and tears, health to emerge, and joy, joy universal. Out of the bulk, the morbid and the shallow, out of the bad majority, the varied countless frauds of men and states, electric, antiseptic, yet cleaving, suffusing all. Only the good is universal. Over the mountain grows disease and sorrow. An uncaught bird is ever hovering, hovering, high in the purer, happier air. From imperfection's murkiest cloud darts always forth one ray of perfect light, one flash of heaven's glory, to fashion custom's discord, to the mad babel den, the deafening orgies, soothing each lull, a strain is heard, just heard, from some far shore, the final chorus sounding. O blessed eyes, the happy hearts that see, that know the guiding thread so fine along the mighty labyrinth. And thou, America, for the scheme's culmination, its thought and its reality, for these, not thyself, thou hast arrived. Thou too surroundest all, embracing, carrying, welcoming all. Thou too, by pathways broad and new to the ideal tendest. The measured phase of other lands, the grandeurs of the past, are not for thee, but grandeurs of thine own. Deific faiths and amplitudes absorbing, comprehending all, eligible to all for immortality. Love, like the light, silently wrapping all, nature's amelioration, blessing all, the blossoms, fruits of ages, orchards divine and certain, forms, objects, grows, humanities, to spiritual images ripening. Give me, O God, to sing that thought. Give me him or her I love, this quenchless faith in thy ensemble. Whatever else withheld, withhold not from us belief in plan of thee enclosed in time and space. Health, peace, salvation universal. Is it a dream? Nay, but the lack of it the dream. And failing it, life's lore and wealth, a dream. And all the world, a dream.
That's that poem is actually really I had a conversation with Jonathan Demir last week, and yeah, we talked about a lot of that stuff in that poem. So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made a great clip. I almost wish you could play it. He made a great clip of Douglas Harding.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could find
that
it.
Poem right there, to me, right there, I would say this. Like, there's been all this talk about meta modernity, right there. Walt Whitman, back in the mid 19th century, writing from in the midst of the modern. That right there, that vision in that poem that Whitman has, that's the meta modern.
Mm-hmm.
And notice how he keeps all these high dreams of modernity are incorporated into it. Like science, the idealized notion of America. It's all at play within that, but at moving it to something beyond itself.
Right. How could I share a clip? I go into.
Oh yeah, you just click on the to share a clip. You just click on the present button, and then you would just share from like whatever tab that you have the clip in, and just make sure you have the share sound.
So I go share screen.
Yeah, just go to present and then share screen and then choose the tab and then make sure you have the enable sharing the audio on.
Also, share tab audio is on.
And now go ahead and just click the tab and should be able to start sharing it.
Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yep. We got it.
Woohoo! Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, it's not this
The
one.
circle of ceremonial magic, just like that of science, is.
Okay, let me just. I just want to share this clip that Jonathan made of Douglas Harding. Oh, here it is. It's so good.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that clip. I've seen the video where he wears that blue shirt.
Yeah, but he clipped it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we want the glory of God to like transfigure this in a way, not to escape the Ouroboros, but like to theophanize it or something. And
well, like this is why I referred back to George MacDonald's phrase, "as you call it," right? Because we can only name what we think we see. And I'm going to try to collect some thoughts together here. Hopefully it makes sense. But Douglas Harding has a video that I really love where he says,
I believe there are two worlds, and they're vastly, vastly different. And the first world is the world we're told we live in, a world of convention, a make-believe world, a world that's determined by language and custom and convention that we're all told we're living in. Language is party to the construction of this as-if world, the world of convention. We know when we're very little, we don't live in that world of convention. We live in the as-is world, the world as presented, the world as given. And as we grow up, we trade in that as-is world, the real world as presented, God's world, if you wish. We trade that for the as-if world, the world of convention. And nearly all of us live and die convinced that the as-if world, the world of convention, mediated to us by parents, teachers, bless their hearts, and language, we live and die as if that is the real world. It's my experience that the as-is world, the world as given, before I start mucking about with it, when I'm simple enough to dare to look at what's presented, I say, in my experience, that world is woven of blessings. It's a world full of blessing. It's a world built to a fabulously beautiful design. And conversely, I find that the as-if or conventional world that we are asked to believe in is a pretty awful place. Man's world and God's world. And the thing is, to get out of one into the other, I get into trouble when I use the word God. But substitute your own synonym for her. In the real world, God's world, if you wish, as-is world, and the conventional world, we condemn ourselves to living in. They say that nearer to you than all else is the eternal awakeness, awareness, reality from which all flows. Well, it becomes a matter of urgency at my time in life to get this matter cleared up, doesn't it? I mean, I look in my mirror, and I've been looking at this guy in the mirror for 82 years. And every time I look at him, he's nearer to death. He's a terminal case. He's been a terminal case for 82 years. And if I'm him, if I'm that one, gosh, I've had it, haven't I? I've had it. But you see, this as-if world, what does that say? It says, that's you in the mirror. Now, when we were very little, every mum here knows, every dad knows, that when we were very little, we looked in the mirror and that was our friend. That was our friend in the mirror. It wasn't ourselves, it was our friend. When we were very little, we were sane. We were sane and we told the truth. And there was our little friend in the mirror. And then we grew up. They kept telling me, that's Douglas, that's Douglas, that's you, that's you. I bought into that one, you know. He was a parasite. And parasites drain your energy, they debilitate, and they kill you. And it seems to me that the great delusion, the great nonsense of the as-if world, where the conventional world is that I am here, what I look like there. And that's suicide. It's nothing less than suicide, because this one is a death's head. It's nearer to death every time I look. If I'm that, I've had it. That is mortal. If anything is mortal. And when I take him and put him here, turning the thing round, mucking about with it, creeping up my arm, and putting it here, I've committed suicide. It ain't true. So he's here. So I suggest all of us go back from this meeting and look in a mirror to see what we are not like. Thank God. Look in a mirror. Thank God I'm not like that here. It's a killer to be like that. It's a killer. And everybody knows. I mean, their hearts, our minds and hearts respond to this message that you are not what you look like. You are not what you look like. What you look like is very marvelous, and I'm enjoying it tremendously. But you see, it's on the way out. It's a temporary thing. The question is, what are you looking out of? What are you at 0 inches from yourself? I say the art of life to transfer from the as-is world, as-if world, man's world, the world that's a killer world, to transfer from that to the as-is world, God's world, the world which I say is woven of blessings. All we have to do is to come home to the place we never left, to who you really, really, really are, the eternal reality, the imperishable being from whom all come and to whom all return. And this is the most neglected place in the whole universe. I mean, I think this place we're going to point out is more neglected than the moons around Venus, and the black holes and the galaxies. This place really is incredibly neglected, and it's astounding that we neglect it, seeing that it is the very plumb center of our life, and we're going to point to that.
Oh.
But let us begin by
There's the
pointing
as
at
you call
something
it.
else.
Hello?
Yeah, no.
Did it work?
Yeah, it worked. I was able to hear it. Yeah, yeah. That, it's interesting the way he clipped it, because I've seen that Harding lecture before.
That's why I wanted to show you specifically his little
yeah.
little, why did I refer us to this clip? Now I'm trying to remember, because something you were
I think
talking about
the
Whitman
poem,
poem.
the Universal.
Right. The universal. Yeah.
And I think that's pretty, like, that's what Harding is pointing at, the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that, like you in your particularity, in your instantiation, you ultimately participate in that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, participation is really an adequate way of expressing it, because it has a higher degree of reciprocity than the notion of participation suggests.
Well, the whole time he was talking about that, I was thinking of this Burma quote that it's not from Burma, actually. It's from a different guy. It's from the guy who wrote his introduction. His name is John Elliston. Now I at least remember. He wrote the introduction to the Signature of All Things from Jacob Burma. And it says here, this book is a true mystical mirror of the highest wisdom. The best treasure that a man can attain unto in this world is true knowledge, even the knowledge of himself. For man is the great mystery of God, the microcosm, or the complete abridgment of the whole universe. He is the Mirandum Dei opus, God's masterpiece, a living emblem and hieroglyphic of eternity and time. And therefore to know whence he is, and what his temporal and eternal being and well-being are, must needs be that one necessary thing to which all our chief study should aim, and in comparison which all the wealth of this world is but dross and a loss to us. And that's what Douglas Harding did, right? The chief study of who am I? What am I? Right? Yeah. Anyway, that's a little side trail, but I've got a couple poems picked out that they're not mine. This one is Rilke. I thought I would read it.
Go for it.
Yeah. It's from the Duino Elegy.
Have we dropped a link yet for people?
I did drop a link, but you can do another one.
Okay.
I dropped a link right in the beginning.
Okay. I just want to make sure people know that
there's not too many people watching actually at the moment, but
must be a busy Saturday for everybody.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll just read this. I like this one, and I'll try to do it justice. It's the first elegy. Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angels' hierarchies? And even if one of them pressed me suddenly against his heart, I would be consumed in that overwhelming existence. For beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we still are just able to endure, and we are so awed because it serenely disdains to annihilate us. Every angel is terrifying, and so I hold myself back and swallow the call note of my dark sobbing. Ah, whom can we ever turn to in our need? Not angels, not humans, and already the knowing animals are aware that we are not really at home in our interpreted world. Perhaps there remains for us some tree on a hillside, which every day we can take into our vision. There remains for us yesterday's street, and the loyalty of a habit so much at ease when it stayed with us that it moved in and never left. Oh, and night. There is night, when a wind full of infinite space gnaws at our faces. Whom would it not remain for, that longed after mildly disillusioning presence, which the solitary heart so painfully meets? Is it any less difficult for lovers? But they keep on using each other to hide their own fate. Don't you know yet? Fling the emptiness out of your arms into the spaces we breathe. Perhaps the birds will feel the expanded air with more passionate flying. Yes, the springtimes needed you. Often a star was waiting for you to notice it. A wave rolled toward you out of the distant past, or as you walked under an open window, a violin yielded itself to your hearing. All this was mission. But could you accomplish it? Weren't you always distracted by expectation, as if every event announced a beloved? Where can you find a place to keep her with all the huge, strange thoughts inside you coming and going, and often staying all night? And when you feel longing, sing of women in love, for their famous passion is still not immortal. Sing of women abandoned and desolate. You envy them almost, who could love so much more purely than those who were gratified. Begin again and again the never attainable praising. Remember, the hero lives on. Even his downfall was merely a pretext for achieving his final birth. But nature, spent and exhausted, takes lovers back into herself, as if there were not enough strength to create them a second time. Have you imagined Gaspar Estampa intensely enough so that any girl deserted by her beloved might be inspired by that fierce example of soaring, objectless love, and might say to herself, perhaps I can be like her? Shouldn't this most ancient of sufferings finally grow more fruitful for us? Isn't it time that we lovingly freed ourselves from the beloved and quivering endured as the arrow endures the bowstring's tension, so that gathered in the snap of release, it can be more than itself? For there is no place where we can remain. Voices, voices. Listen, my heart, as only saints have listened, until the gigantic call lifted them off the ground. Yet they kept on, impossibly, kneeling, and didn't notice at all. So complete was their listening. Not that you could endure God's voice, far from it, but listen to the voice of the wind and the ceaseless message that forms itself out of silence. It is murmuring toward you now from those who died young. Didn't their fate, whenever you stepped into a church in Naples or Rome, quietly come to address you? Or high up, some eulogy entrusted you with a mission? Or last year on the plaque of Santa Maria Formosa? What they want of me is that I gently remove the appearance of injustice about their death, which at times slightly hinders their souls from proceeding onward. Of course, it is strange to inhabit the earth no longer, to give up customs one barely had time to learn, not to see roses and other promising things in terms of a human future, no longer to be what one was in infinitely anxious hands, to leave even one's own first name behind, forgetting it as easily as a child abandons a broken toy. Strange to no longer desire one's desires. Strange to see meanings that clung together once, floating away in every direction. And being dead is hard work and full of retrieval before one can gradually feel the trace of eternity. Though the living are wrong to believe in the too sharp distinctions which they themselves have created, angels, they say, don't know whether it is the living they are moving among or the dead. The eternal torrent whirls all ages along in it, through both realms forever, and their voices are drowned out in its thunderous roar. In the end, those who were carried off early no longer need us. They are weaned from earth's sorrows and joys as gently as children outgrow the soft breasts of their mothers. But we who do need such great mysteries, we for whom grief is so often the source of our spirit's growth, could we exist without them? Is the legend meaningless that tells how in the lament for Linus, the daring first notes of spring pierced through the barren numbness, and then in the startled space which a youth as lovely as God had suddenly left forever, the void felt for the first time, that harmony which now enraptures and comforts and helps us.
That was Rilke, right?
That was Rilke. That was the first elegy in the Duino elegies. I just thought some of these books I have, I'm going to start with number 1. Then I could just read the next one.
Anselman's asking for the title and the writer.
That is, and it's also a really great translation. This is Duino Elegies by Rainer Maria Rilke, and the translator is Stephen Mitchell. And I recommend his translations. I've read lots of different translations of Rilke, and they all suck except his, in my opinion.
Oh wow, really?
Well, I just think they take too much license. He doesn't do that. He stays really nicely true to the text.
Yeah.
The stream feels audaciously autistic.
You can come. You want to jump in?
Hey, come on, CW. I know you got some poetry.
I tell you what. I just have to express my appreciation of the F-bombs you were dropping on PBK's live stream yesterday. So I'm all in favor of making English again. So
Anglo Bros. Who would have ever thought you'd fall into the same category as CW and Anselman made?
I think so. CW is a Presbyterian. That he's referencing. There was actually like a comment, like
right. I remember. Yes, yeah, I knew that. I knew that you would not be able to hold that.
You know, it's like what is his last name? I don't remember his last name. Dave. I've seen him on the live streams lately. He's had like really intelligent things to say.
David?
I really liked it. Yeah,
David. Yeah,
and I was surprised. I was part of it. Part of my reaction was shock, because like most of the time, I find the things that he says to be like really intelligent, well thought out, and resonant. And
well, he was criticizing himself.
Yeah, that's what it. Right. Which is fine. Once I realized he was including himself in the criticism, that totally changed the the
he's on he's been mostly on okay, so he's been mostly on Jacob's streams, and Shepherdess. What is autistic about the stream? Nothing. It's a joke from a live stream yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was interesting. My class, and actually, like in my class with Jordan Daniel Wood this morning, toward the end of the class, like someone asked a question about like Maximus's attitude toward the passions, and which is very much classically like in the Eastern like style, where it doesn't have like that turn that the West makes toward like seeing the good use of the passions. It's just like pretty much just negative toward the passions. With some hints possibly at there being seeds in his thought of making a move toward that. But like, so I ended up in the discussion, like, and ended up saying like, yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm Anglican and not Orthodox, is like, I just don't like, I think that like, although there's much I admire in Orthodox theology, I think it has gaps and holes. Then there actually are areas where there are actually areas of theology that the West has done like a better job with. And so I remember I was thinking back. I didn't talk about it in the class with Jordan Daniel Wood, but I was thinking in that live stream yesterday, there was that young Orthodox man who was saying that they don't even really do dating. Well, it's like that. I'm like, so immediately that made sense to me, because it's like, yes, of course you don't do dating, because the East never really like developed the tradition of romantic love in the same way that the West did. That's really a product of
well, I don't know how
Western
true.
Christianity.
I mean, that's a pretty blanket statement for a bunch of Orthodox Christians that they don't do dating. Like,
I didn't say it. The young man said it. I didn't say that. Like, yeah, no. So
maybe
it's like
maybe he doesn't do dating, or the young people in his parish don't do dating.
Well, but I would people who are looking at Orthodoxy through that kind of like very like isolated,
hey, listen,
neo-patristic lens.
I grew up in a denomination that was Protestant and didn't do dating. Okay,
right. Right. Sure.
This stuff is just, it's all human problems for me.
I'm not saying this to slam on orthodoxy.
I know you're not.
All I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to do is to point toward a more, to like realize like a vision that can say like, hey, there are things that have been developed in the West that are good and that are missing from the East, and vice versa. Like that's all I'm trying to say.
Totally. So. And I'm not trying to defend orthodoxy, actually. What I'm saying is that someone who says in the Orthodox Church we don't do dating, I'm like, yeah, well, in the Protestant Church I didn't do dating either. So what are you going to do with that? Right. You know what I mean? Like, is that just exclusively Orthodox?
But there's definitely, the reason I brought up the dating thing is like clearly, like if you the idea of dating is dependent upon you having a notion of romantic love. Otherwise, dating doesn't make sense, right? Otherwise, you just would arrange marriages.
I'm you know what? When I spent time in India, I was like, arranged marriage isn't that bad, actually.
No, I'm not mean, and that's also, I'm not saying that there's nothing to be said for arranged marriages or tradition either.
I'm just being contrarian. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It's totally fine. I do have on that note, I do have a poem though, another poem.
Yay.
So let's just break that with just like, we are supposed to be here to do poetry anyway.
You got a bunch of Anglican bros in the thing here. This is great.
Oh. Yeah. Awesome.
Stephanie asked this question: What is major difference between English and American Anglican?
Well, first,
there's all different factions too, right?
Yeah, it's complicated. Anglicanism is pretty muddy in North America. So first of all, in the UK, the Anglican tradition is simply the established state church. It's like it's in communion with the See of Canterbury. That is like the American Anglican tradition is not in communion with the See of Canterbury because it's essentially a conservative breakaway movement. And you have there are a few different ones. So I happen to go to an ACNA church, which is the Anglican Church in North America, which is a conservative. They don't consider themselves continuing Anglican because they claim apostolic succession via their being in communion with certain African bishops. And then you also have like various continuing Anglican movements. For example, David Bentley Hart's brother Robert is a continuing Anglican priest in North Carolina. He's part of a completely, and then also my friend Dr. Chris Green he's part of a completely other separate continuing Anglican tradition that has like a deep connection to Pentecostal charismatic streams. So but the big thing is more conservative and not more conservative theologically and not Episcopal. Like that's the thing. So, but it's the Episcopal Church in America that is the official, like in communion with Canterbury, American version of what would be Anglicanism. So
it looks like the shepherdess is causing Saint Martin Luther to just spin in his grave. Eh? Can you imagine?
Oh, that's interesting. You know, I went to a Roman Catholic college, and my my Latin teacher at Thomas Aquinas College, the Roman Catholic college I went to, was a Lutheran. She was a Lutheran, and actually, she was like one of the only non-Catholic faculty at the entire college. But she was a very conservative, traditional Lutheran. And very conservative traditional Lutherans are really
high church, right?
That's very high church and surprisingly Catholic. Like they almost are. They're actually kind of similar to Anglo-Catholics within the Anglican tradition, the very traditional Lutherans. So it's interesting. It gets really interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, you got a poem?
Yep, I got a poem. All right.
Come on, people, join.
This is called Salvation, and it's by James Kimbrell. It's not that I harbor a weeping willow shadow's worth of longing for those cloaked turns and straightaways, or that swampy South Mississippi was ever half as tragic as I dreamed it could be. But I still cruise from time to time in the dope ripe Ford Fairlane of the mind where nothing has changed, where we remain hopelessly stone devotees of the town of Leaksville, emblazoned upon the graffitied water towers testimonies to love. We believed speed would save us, would take us fast and far away from the junkyard wrecks stacked in their mile-long convoy to nowhere, and their losing the way should have seemed the worst of divine betrayals. We took it as a minor fall from grace, tail spun over the embankment rail, rocking that flung steel body down as if to play a bar chord on the barbed wire fence. I'll never know what angelic overseer was bored and on duty that night, but we rose up and climbed out of the warped last breath of that car, no one with so much as a scratch on his head, not a drop of beer spilt, and the radiator hissing like a teapot in hell, when someone yelled, "She's gonna blow!" And each of us standing there, starving for something more, something other than the black wheel spinning that sudden, dark, cricketed quiet.
Wow, that's awesome. Who was that?
That was
Sounds like one of your poems.
James Kimbrell. It does. That's kind of similar to me.
Like one of your poems. I thought,
he's kind of close to he passed away at a young age, but he actually is like, he was born in 1967, so another Gen Xer. So yeah, American poet, James Kimbrell.
I've seen a few of those scenarios.
Yeah, I actually had one on the way back.
I'm not ashamed to say.
Well, I actually had a few of those. Well, first of all, there was a time where we were like going to Vegas. We took off from Thomas Aquinas College and we were going to Vegas, and we had a fifth of Jack Daniels and a fifth of gin and an eighth of marijuana, and we had all taken more than one hit of blotter acid, and we were driving. This was like a Hunter S. Thompson inspired like pilgrimage to Vegas from Santa Paula, California. And I was smoking we were driving to Vegas, and I don't know how we got there in one piece or how we didn't get pulled over by the cops, because
like this guy said in the poem, you had angels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And at one point I was smoking my clove cigarette, right? And I was flicking my ashes out the window. And the car we were in had Missouri plates, because my friend who was driving, like, he was from Columbia, Missouri. He had actually been a transfer student from the University of Missouri to Thomas Aquinas College. And I'm flicking the ashes of my clove out the window, and a California Highway patrolman like comes right up and says, "That's illegal in the state of California." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, officer," and I rolled up the window. He didn't pull us over.
Wow.
But yeah, so yeah, he certainly would have had every reason to pull us over.
And all the goodies he would have found.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then once when I was a senior in high school, we were coming back from a concert, and it's like this one, there was like, we weren't really doing anything that naughty. I got to see a concert at the Gorge in Eastern Washington with my friend, and the concert was Stevie Ray Vaughan and Robert Cray and Steve Hyatt. And we were coming back. We couldn't get a hotel because we had money for a hotel, but we didn't have a credit card.
Oh,
and we were 18 and we were under 21, so no one would rent us a hotel room because we weren't 21 and we didn't have a credit card. So it's like we had to try to sleep in the car. And so we put on like Cowboy Junkies Trinity Session and like tried to fall asleep in the car. I'm like, I mean, it's very relaxing, and maybe got a little bit of shut eye. I love that album still too. But we basically were driving back from the gorge with no sleep at all, and my buddy RJ was driving, and I'd fallen asleep in the front seat, and I wake up just in time to see him. I see him asleep at the wheel, 100% like asleep at the wheel. And the car is veering right into the face of the we were actually close to home because we were actually driving through the Black Hills, which are like the Black Hills is an area of Grace Harbor County, but like in between Olympia and Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And he's like careening into the face of the Black Hills on the highway. And I like wake him up, and I wake him up just in time.
Whoa.
Like I happened to wake up at that exact moment. Happened
Another
to wake
angel.
him up just in time for him to steer away for us to not.
Another
And
angel.
from that point on, we only had like another like 25 minutes to home. Maybe 30 minutes home. So we were probably like near McCleary. Yeah. So
Thank God, Nate, or we wouldn't be sitting here.
no, we would not. So
Wow.
no joiners yet, huh? I want to see that. Like, I want to talk to CW now. Like, I really want to talk to him.
Yeah, CW. Where he left. He's probably gone.
Yeah, he's already left.
We're not controversial enough.
Or not controversial though. Okay, so I missed somehow. I saw that. What did him and Luke get
Some
into?
people just want to talk about controversial shit. I just want to talk about poetry.
Yeah, I want to gossip about what was it that I heard. I kind of caught the idea.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Incognito.
There he is. I knew I'd draw him out with that.
I want to know, what was your beef with Luke about? You got to come in and tell me about that.
You talking to CW?
Yeah.
Oh, he had a beef with Luke?
Apparently, that's what it sounds like from what I heard Luke saying. Unless I misunderstood, which is possible.
Okay, well, while CW gets his courage up to come on our live stream. Come on, CW, you little coward.
I don't know. He's got a little bit of that Doc Holliday look going on.
I'm just being facetious. I'm just trying to make him mad.
Am I the only one to think that CW that something about the aura of CW reminds me of like a gunfighter? Or something of the gunfighter aura to CW.
CW?
Yeah.
Gunfighter? Well, maybe just if he had one of those little pencil mustaches, or does he?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read them.
He's got a certain quiet confidence, I think.
CW knows who he is.
Yeah, that's a very self-assured person.
He knows who he is, and there's not a lot of them around here. So get in here, CW.
Yeah,
it'll be great. I call him the Casanova of conversation.
Oh, really? There you go.
Yep. Okay, so I read the first letter out of The Dark Interval by Rainer Maria Rilke, a favorite of mine, as you can tell, and now I'm going to read the second letter. This letter was written to Countess Lily Knetz-Minar. Don't forget that Rilke had a great love for rich women. And so most of the letters in here are to them. She lived from 1869 to 1943, and she was the great niece of Rilke's acquaintance, Countess Louise Schwerin, who lived from 1846 to 1906, in whose memory he wrote the poem Experience of Death, 1907. She performed as a concert singer and conductor under the name Lily Minar. This is written July 16th, 1908, in the evening, in Paris. I thank you, my dear friend, for having written to me. 50 times I wanted to respond since receiving your letter, but couldn't get to it. There is so much that I need to get through right now. I mean, in my work, and I don't have quite as much energy as I ought to. And then, to add to all of this incommensurate event, what is one supposed to say? How should one account for it? It is always the same question. Over the past few years, I have had to ask myself this question several times. The death of Countess Schwerin and my father's death each of which provided me with an experience of infinite greatness and magnanimity, have resulted in the fact that I no longer fear this question. And yet it is difficult to have to face it again so closely, even in the brightest day. And in this most recent case, it is complicated by so many things. Who was this woman who lived for other people, and yet beneath everything, and without knowing or admitting to it, harbored the demands of an entire life within her as if they had been left there entirely touched, so that one could often get the idea that she was also the opposite of what she wanted to be, and that both of these states would be equally true and equally unreal. And finally, what sort of relationship did one have with her, in which fondness and even admiration was so oddly compatible with resistance, rejection, and harsh judgments that one never dared to fully take stock of it and arrive at a net total? And for quite some time, I experienced the kindness she displayed toward me, and which eventually turned into a friendship. I don't know when, rather as a beautifully executed legacy from the wonderful sister who preceded her, than as an actual gift from her. In trying to make sense of this, I only move further away from any insight into this person. Today, my attitude toward death is that it frightens me more in those whom I failed to truly encounter, and who remained inexplicable or disastrous to me, than it does in those whom I loved with certainty when they were alive, even if they burst only for a brief moment into the radiant transfiguration of intimacy which love can reach. If people took some simple pleasure in reality, which is entirely independent of time, they would never have needed to come up with the idea that they could ever again lose anything with which they had truly bonded. No constellation is as steadfast, no accomplishment as irrevocable as a connection between human beings which, at the very moment it becomes visible, works more forcefully in those invisible depths where our existence is as lasting as gold lodged in stone, more constant than a star. This is why I agree with you, my dear friend, when you say that you mourn those who go away. Alas, only those can go away from us whom we never possessed. And we cannot even grieve the fact of never really having possessed this one or that one. We would have neither time nor strength nor justification for doing so, for already the most fleeting experience of true possession, or of having something in common with another person, which is after all only double possession, flings us back into ourselves with such enormous force and requires so much of us to do there, and demands such extremely solitary development, that it would be enough to keep all of us occupied individually forever. Is this not the case? The letter before your last one conveyed such good news that I now wish 1,000 times that your current travels and your inner resolve will very soon lead to more such news, and that you will not be remiss in sending them to me. Clara is busy at work and produces beautiful things. I will see her at the end of the week. Your loyally devoted friend, Rainer Maria Rilke. So, I see that I'm all alone again. And we've been going for 1.5 hours. Oh, I see. Okay. Nate's mother arrived, which is great. Does somebody want to jump on with me and read a poem that they wrote or that they like, or even some prose that they like? Mephistopheles. Oh, that would be nice. Gustav Sobin. I don't know who that is. I'll have to check it out. Well, I've got a few things here. I'm going to read this Yeats here. And if nobody jumps in while I'm reading this poem, I'm going to sign off after this. If somebody jumps in, they can lengthen the live stream. Just a little tempting. Okay, this is by W.B. Yeats, and it's Easter 1916. It's a little bit longer, so that gives you some time to decide whether or not you want to jump in. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among gray 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head, or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn, all changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when young and beautiful she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed, a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart, yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live, the stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part, to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child, when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, no, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith, for all that is done and said. We know their dream enough to know they dreamed and are dead. But what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse. MacDonough and McBride and Connolly and Pierce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Oh, that just gives you a sense of what it must have felt like during that First World War. So, I see nobody's coming, so I think I'll sign off. I'm just going to check something because I asked someone to send me a poem and I didn't check to see if they did. And they didn't. Okay. Good. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining me and Nate. And I guess, what's the date today? How many Saturdays do we have left in April? Because we're doing poetry for the month of April. So we've got one more and then we're done. So, yeah, it would be wonderful if, CW, he said he's going to drop in. Last chance. Well, I'm sure we'll do another one at some point. But yeah. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week.